Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome. So before I begin, can I just double check that everyone can see and hear me? Yep, lovely. Okay, and if I could ask that you turn your cameras on if you've not already done so, but I can see everyone's got their camera on. And it's time now for me to start the examination hearing into the Great Yarmouth Borough Council Community Infrastructure Levy Charging Schedule. My name is Joanne Burston, and my colleague Mike Hayden is also on the call. Perhaps Mike, you can wave just so people can see. There we go. So that's Mr. Hayden. So we're both planning inspectors and chartered town planners. We have been appointed by Great Yarmouth Borough Council to examine its draft community infrastructure levy, also known as the CIL, charging schedule, and prepare a report to the council on legal compliance and viability of the schedule, and, if necessary, any changes or further work to be undertaken before it is adopted. I have a few opening announcements and comments to make, which will take around 15 minutes. I'll then invite the council to make their opening statement, following which we'll proceed with the discussion of the first main issue on infrastructure planning, at the start of which I'll ask the participants to introduce themselves. So this hearing is being recorded by the council. The recording will be made available for anyone to view on the examination website after the hearing has finished. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about this? No? Okay. So would you please make sure that any mobile phones or any devices other than the one you're using to participate in this session are switched off and are silent while the hearing is in session. Also, please would you ensure that the microphone on the device you are using is muted until you're invited to speak, so that we can avoid any disturbance from background noise or feedback from microphones or computers. I will just note that we're used to, with this new home working environment, that there are sometimes disturbances from doorbells ringing, or in my case, dogs barking. They always make me jump every time they start barking. So I do apologise if this disrupts anyone while we're on the call. The programme officer for the examination is Annette Feeney. Annette works for us and independently from the council. She is responsible for all administrative arrangements for the examination and the hearings. Outside the hearing sessions, any contact you make with us should be through Annette. Our role as the examiners is to establish whether the council has complied with the legal requirements in preparing and consulting on the draft charging schedule. The schedule is supported by appropriate available evidence on infrastructure and viability. The levy rates proposed are informed by and consistent with the viability evidence, and that the evidence shows that the proposed rates would not undermine the deliverability of the local plan or put at risk the overall development in the area. Just to make clear, we are examining the draft charging schedule as modified by the Statement of Modifications, document reference A5-CIL, which is in the examination library, which was published in February 2025. So there are three possible outcomes to this examination. So firstly, that the approval of the charging schedule, if the legal requirements have been met and no changes are necessary. Secondly, that there's an approval of the charging schedule subject to modifications, if the schedule can be modified so as to comply with the drafting requirements. Or finally, rejection, where the council has not complied with the drafting requirements and this cannot be remedied by modifying the draft charging schedule. We will prepare a report on our findings after this hearing. So the examination briefing note, document C2, which all those on the call should have received, outlines the procedures to be followed at the hearing, the way in which written representations will be dealt with, and the availability of information. This also sets out the way in which we expect participants to conduct themselves and participate in this hearing. And also, this is set out for reference in the virtual guidance note, which has been also sent out to participants along with their invitations to this event today. The final hearing programme, document C6 in the examination library, was published on the 12th of February and will be following that programme today. This morning, the hearing will run to approximately 1 p.m. with a half an hour break at around 11 a.m. This afternoon we'll resume at 2 p.m. with another short break at around 3:30 p.m. We will aim to close around 5 to 5:30 p.m, subject to how the discussion goes. During the breaks at mid-morning, lunchtime and at mid-afternoon, if participants would please remain in the hearing sessions on their Teams call, but turn your cameras off and mute your microphones. If you have any connectivity issues while you're in a session, please follow the suggested steps in the penultimate paragraph of the virtual hearing guidance note. The hearing will be in a form of a structured discussion which we will both lead following the programme, which is based on the main issues and questions, excuse me, which is document C4, which has already been circulated. We will invite people to speak at particular times, but if you have something to contribute at the appropriate part of the discussion, please indicate your wish to do so by using the raise hands button on Teams. Does everyone know how to use the raise hands button? Yes. Lovely. Okay. Please do not use the chat function, as we will not be using that today, and we would ask your cameras to please remain switched on for the entire session, but your microphones muted until you're invited to speak. There may be some issues or questions on which we have enough information to reach a conclusion, so there may be little or no discussions on these. The examination will remain open after the hearing is ended and until our report is submitted. However, after the hearings, we will not accept any further representation or evidence unless we have specifically agreed to it. Does anyone have any questions at this stage about the procedures or programme for the event today? No. Okay. So at this point, I will invite the Council to make a short opening statement. As part of this, we've asked the Council to confirm that the schedule has been prepared in accordance with, firstly, the statutory procedures, then the Council's adopted local plan and infrastructure delivery plan, and finally that the consultation requirements set out in the CIL regulations, and also to confirm that it is supported by a viability study and that there are no fundamental procedural shortcomings. So I'll turn now to the Council to give their opening statement, please. Yes.
Good morning. Thank you. My name's Nick Fountain and I'm the Interim Head of Planning at Grey Yarmouth Borough Council. On behalf of the Council, I'd like to welcome examiners Mike Hayden and Joanne Burston and thank our Programme Officer Annette Feeney for her management of the Community Infrastructure Levy or CIL examination and today's hearing. This examination provides an important opportunity to introduce CIL as the government's preferred mechanism to secure planning contributions to support the future infrastructure needs of the borough. The emerging Great Yarmouth Local Plan is at an advanced stage of the examination process and it seeks to address the future strategic development and infrastructure requirements of the borough. The Council has identified a significant infrastructure funding gap, which needs to be addressed in part by CIL to assist in the delivery of objectives of the emerging plan. The Council has also undertaken extensive consultation on the draft charging schedule, supported by robust and up-to-date viability evidence in the local plan viability assessment and the infrastructure needs study, which was also subject to modification and scrutiny at the local plan examination. It has regard to the objectives and policy requirements of the local plan, and the draft charging schedule sets out charging rates and zones for certain types of development across the borough. At each consultation stage, the Council has considered representations. It is confident that the CIL rates and charging zones strike an appropriate balance between funding infrastructure provision and development viability. The limited number of representations and attendees to this hearing session suggests a broad support for the approach. The draft charging schedule has been prepared in accordance with the relevant Planning Act 2008 and the CIL Regulations 2011 as amended, and the Council considers that it's prepared its draft charging schedule consistent with all relevant requirements. The draft charging schedule is subject to some minor modifications as outlined in the Council's response to the MIQs. The Council has also invited Mr. Drummond Hay today from HDH Planning and Development as an expert witness on viability matters and the key author to the actual viability assessment for the local plan. We therefore welcome this examination and look forward to a constructive discussion on the route to adopting the Council's first community infrastructure levy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fountain. So please, can a copy of that opening statement be sent to Annette, please, if it hasn't already been done so?
Yes, we'll arrange that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now go on to move on to discuss the first issue on the programme, which is infrastructure planning. We will then move on to discuss residential development. We would like to remind everyone taking part in the discussion that you should have provided all your evidence in your original representation and any hearing position statement. The hearing sessions are not an opportunity to submit anything further, and any comments you make during the hearing session should, therefore, relate to points made in your original representation. We have read your representations and hearing statements, so there's no need to repeat what you've already said. The purpose of this session is for us to seek clarification or further information on any outstanding questions we have. So now can I ask participants for this session to introduce themselves, starting with the Council, please. So Mr. Fountain, perhaps you'd introduce your team?
Yeah, so firstly, well, my name is Nick Fountain. As I said, I'm the interim head of planning. I'll introduce Kim Balls.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Balls. I'm interim strategic planning manager for the Borough Council, and I'd like to introduce my colleague Toby Hadlow.
Good morning, inspectors. My name is Toby Hadlow. I'm a senior planning officer with the Borough Council. I'll introduce my colleague Sunny Raggett.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sunny Raggett and I'm a planner at Great Yarmouth Borough Council within the strategic planning team. And I will introduce my colleague, Nicole Jarmy.
Good morning, I'm Nicole Jarmy and I'm a strategic planning officer at the Borough Council.
Thank you. Okay, does that conclude the Council's team? Yeah.
It does. Obviously, we've also got Mr. Drummond Hay here as well.
I was just going to ask Mr. Drummond Hay to introduce himself.
Good morning. I'm Simon Drummond Hay from HDH Planning, and we have with the authors of the local plan viability assessment, which also covered CIL.
Thank you. And Mr. Coote, also on the call.
Hi there, I'm Justin Coote. I'm director at Badger Building.
Thank you. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Mr. Hayden, who's going to take us through the first of the topics for this morning's discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Burston, and good morning, everyone, from me. Good to see some familiar faces again. I'm just going to lead on this morning's sessions on infrastructure planning and residential development. So I'll just kind of talk you through how things will go. So I have a question, just one question really initially for the council on infrastructure planning, and then we'll need a bit of time on residential development. So I'm just to explain, I'll break that into two parts. We'll deal with the viability evidence first, and then we'll go on to discuss residential rates and viability margins. So we'll do it in two chunks, but there are some elements of the viability evidence that we need to talk about. And Mr. Coote, good to see you. I can't remember whether you attended the local plan hearings, but it's good to meet you as well. Yeah, a number of questions for yourself as well when it comes to the viability evidence. So just to let you know. So we'll take it that way. Be directed by us, as Ms. Burston said. We've got specific questions. We read all of the evidence. There's no need to kind of repeat what you've already said. We've got some very specific questions that we need some answers to. So So firstly, on infrastructure planning, grateful to the council for your responses to our main issues and questions, so particularly questions 1 and 2. Just to be clear, we have already examined the infrastructure list, or the list of infrastructure and the types of infrastructure that are required to support planned growth in the borough as part of the local plan examination. So we don't intend to revisit those elements of the infrastructure planning evidence. What we do need to do is to test that the evidence is sufficient to inform or to confirm the aggregate infrastructure funding gap, and to justify the amount the charging authority estimates that it will raise through CIL. So that's obviously one of the requirements of the PPG in respect of a CIL examination. So if I can just summarise back to you what we've understood from the evidence that's been presented to us. So you submitted, the council submitted an infrastructure funding note, H82, that is document H82, during the local plan examination. Might be helpful, I should say, just to have that open, and also the infrastructure needs study as well. So my apologies for not alerting you to that, but just go to pages 15 and 16 of that, of the infrastructure funding note. Yeah, that just sets out in a couple of tables the summary position in respect of infrastructure needs and costs and the CIL funding that's expected to be generated. So from that, we understand there it's estimated there will be a funding gap of 41.5 million for all of the infrastructure, and then within that 37.9 million for essential infrastructure. That's once section 106 funding has been factored in, and of that CIL would generate, and that CIL would generate around 13.6 million in terms of receipts. So those are the figures that we read in that table. So on the face of it, the evidence suggests there will be an aggregate funding gap that on the face of it justifies levying a CIL. So that's what the evidence at the moment shows us. What we just want some further clarification on, though, is I think you've confirmed in your calculations and in the tables that the calculations don't include any figures for funding from other sources. So things like Department for Education funding, Department for Transport funding, NHS funding, county council funding, or other government funding, which I think we would expect an area like Great Yarmouth to receive, particularly for new schools, transport, health infrastructure. So the question for the council is, without those figures, how can we reasonably establish that there is a funding gap to justify the proposed CIL charges?
Thank you, Inspector. So in terms of the funding sources, we've identified a range of potential alternative funding sources that haven't been quantified within the funding note, as you've suggested. Document H82, which is the infrastructure funding note, and that's of the local plan examination library. It summarises that information from the infrastructure needs study in the type of developer contribution column, and within the other potential funding sources column, where that's been identified within the infrastructure needs study.
Yeah.
Given that there's no guarantees or sort of quantifiable information on the other funding sources at this stage, that hasn't been factored into the calculation of the funding gap. But the council considers it unlikely that such sources would be sufficient alongside Section 106 funding on their own, without the introduction of CIL, given the extent and size of the funding gap. I think, as set out in response to question 2 as well, that the infrastructure needs study was supported by numerous other assessments. I think we referenced the Great Yarmouth Transport Strategy, which lists other potential funding sources within those assessments. But given the stage of infrastructure planning we're at this stage, yeah, we haven't been able to factor in a sort of amount or the grant funding that might be received from various sources or other sources of funding that could be costed into the funding gap. But yeah, as I say, looking at the extent of that funding gap, yeah, we considered there's sufficient justification for CIL in spite of that.
Well, I know you say that is to a degree repeating what you've already said in your evidence, but the question is, nevertheless, without that evidence, how can we be certain that there's a justification for it? I mean, how do we know what sort of level of funding you might expect to receive from alternative sources? Do you not have any track record of funding for different infrastructure projects that you can kind of draw an estimate from?
Yeah,
it's quite a key bit of evidence to be able to support the aggregate funding gap.
Yeah, so the council does have a track record of obtaining funding for infrastructure projects in the borough. We've got a recent record of numerous sort of transport infrastructure with the Third River crossing and other infrastructure projects around Great Yarmouth that have come forward in recent years. I think some of that information may have been provided as part of the local plan examination, although not quantified. Obviously, we haven't got that information within the CIL examination library. If it's a case of we need to review the information that we can pull together from historic sort of sources of funding that we're for infrastructure projects that come forward in recent years over the sort of since 2013 and the previous local plan period, where we've obtained funding sources from other providers. That's something we can go away and have a look at.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that in some cases there are. I'm just scrolling through the list of infrastructure in the infrastructure funding note. So there are some types of infrastructure where other potential funding sources are unknown, but you have indicated in quite a few. So, for example, just going from the top, let's say, early years provision, Department for Education, potential funding sources, likewise primary school and secondary provision, homeschool transport. You've indicated potential for DFE funding, healthcare, potential for NHS England funding, and I think on transport you've indicated potential for county council government grants, or libraries, let's say. So I think what it would be helpful for us to know is what sort of funding the authority has received in the past for additional facilities, additional school facilities, additional healthcare facilities, let's say additional library facilities. I think that's I appreciate you. So you haven't got any figures penciled in at the moment, but it'd be helpful for us to know from previous projects what sort of proportion of the cost has been borne by other funding sources.
Yeah, I think that's something we can go away and have a look at. I'll just highlight as well that some of that will of course be provided or have been provided historically through section 106 financial contributions, which I think we set out in table 1 of the infrastructure funding note. But yeah, we would expect, and we know it has been provided through other sources as well, like Norfolk County Council capital funds and the like. So yeah, we can take that away as an action and bear a bit of a note on that.
Yes, that's true. But you've already factored in section 106, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
Calculation. So the sort of net, let's call it a net funding gap after section 106 has been taken into account is 41.5 million, 0.6 million. So it's still a hefty funding gap at that stage. I appreciate there's a fair gap between that and what you expect to generate from CIL, but I think some understanding of the levels of funding that you can expect to receive from those other sources would help just to fill the gap, as it were, fill the information gap on the extent to which the levy is justified from that point of view.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We can take that as well in action.
Okay, thank you. So as we did with the local plan hearings, we'll have a recap of actions when we get to the end of this session, and likewise the afternoon. So, okay, so if I can move on to dealing with residential development now. Okay, so as I've said, we'll deal with viability evidence first, and then we've got some questions on the rates themselves and the rates themselves and the margins for viability. So just dealing with the viability evidence first. Again, I'm grateful to the council for your responses to our questions about that in the local plan viability assessment. We asked in our MIQs whether the evidence for certain inputs or assumptions was appropriate. So just to say at this stage, these are the ones on which we're satisfied that the evidence is appropriate. So we're satisfied that the range of residential typologies tested is representative of the sort of growth that will come forward through the local plan. We're also satisfied that the assumptions for build costs, professional fees, Section 106 allowances, and the policy requirements are all appropriate. But we do have some further questions about sales values, affordable housing values, external works costs, and benchmark land values. And those are things we just want to focus on now. So as I've said earlier, both to the council and to Mr. Coote as well. So if we can just deal with sales values. I'll just come to the council first. In terms of the sales values that have been assumed in the study, and maybe Mr. Drummond-Hay, it's a question for you. But in terms of the sales values that have been assumed, I'm just wondering what account has been taken of the discounts and incentives that are usually offered to buyers in those sales values, given that they are based on the evidence for new build asking prices rather than sold prices. So to what extent do those reflect the actual values that the developer would receive?
We have...
Is that yourself, Mr. Drummond-Hay? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And I remain disappointed that you don't want to recap of viability at the beginning of the hearings, which you always stop me doing.
That's okay.
But life must go on without it. So just to be clear on what we have, on the evidence that we have drawn on, we haven't just drawn on new build asking prices. We have the starting point of our research was actually data from Landmark, and Landmark, we buy data in from Landmark, and that brings together a range of sources of data, including that the base of it is the land registry price paid data, and that's on an individual property level, and that has the price paid, the property type, the date of the sale, and the amount paid. Landmark then gather floor area data, and that comes from two sources, the EPC register and MetroPix. MetroPix is a service owned by Landmark that when estate agents produce their sales particulars, you can use MetroPix to derive the to produce little floor plans you get in sales particulars, and from that Landmark can derive the floor area, also the number of bedrooms, and from that we can derive the pounds per metre squared gross internal values. So the starting point is price paid data. We also look at really everything we can get our fingers on in terms of values. So there's secondary data published by the Land Registry. We look at new existing asking prices, and we look at the medians of those, and we draw on internet data for that, so Rightmove. And we also do carry out a survey of new build asking prices across the area, and in terms of incentives, we said that the asking prices are for new build property, the price is the price. There's very little scope to negotiate on price, but it is fair to say that and correct to say that there are incentives available, and they would be normally in the form of upgraded fittings, fixtures, carpets, the garden finished with turf rather than grass seed, that type of thing. And typically they would be somewhere between 2 and 5%. Since we did this report, Help to Buy has come to an end, and some of the larger house builders, I'm not sure about Badger, but some of the large house builders have come up with deposit schemes to assist developers to assist buyers onto the ladder, and clearly those have a cost. But it's wrong to assume that we have simply taken any one of those sources, data sources, we've brought them together and used professional judgment to derive the values that we've used.
Yeah. I've seen your hand, Mr. Coote. I just want to follow that up briefly with Mr. Donahue. Could you just take me to the relevant section so I can just remind myself of all of that, please?
So I'm in chapter 4 of the report.
Yeah.
At the beginning of chapter 4.
Okay.
We look at some average values, just how Great Yarmouth sits in the wider area, and values in Great Yarmouth are rather lower than in the neighbouring areas. Figure 4.2.
Yeah.
What is interesting about the Great Yarmouth market is that the average new build house is about 51% more expensive than the average existing house.
Hmm.
But before you assume that new build houses are much more expensive than existing houses. You have to remember that the sample that's taken from the existing houses are include the good, the bad, and the ugly, including some relatively poor stock in some parts of Great Yarmouth. So the developers are producing a nice shiny new product for which there is a premium, but the premium isn't 51%. It's the new build product is a different product to the existing product. Just for wider context, we did look at how the market was changing at the time, and I'm at table 4.2, where we've looked at what Savills and some of the lenders were reporting about how the market was changing. And in 2023, prices were more uncertain than they are now. We have had various I'm not sure how to politely describe it. Glitches in the market. We had the unhelpful budget that caused interest rates to go up, which caused uncertainty. But actually, if you look at from the time that we did this study, the mainstream market and the England market has continued to house prices have continued to increase. So when we look at where the data comes from, I've got to page 50 and figure 5.4, where we looked at various areas of the district and estimated median asking prices for 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom houses. And we base that on the main settlements and the areas outside the main settlements. I've just talked about the land registry, the landmark data. Table 4.4 on page 53 is an important table because that sets out the sample sizes. And there is an unhelpful lag in the land registry data. The land registry are dreadful in updating the price paid data for new builds in a timely way. And we've summarized that the house price data in figures 4.6 and 4.7 on pages 54 and 55.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Mr. Coots, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to just come in on that point? And I have got a question for you about the use of NDSS floor space figures for calculating sales values. But did you want to come in on anything that Mr. Drummond said there? Just need to unmute your microphone, sorry.
Apologies.
Okay.
So I would argue that incentives have not been factored into the data. It has been more challenging as a market for developers than I think was alluded to there. We've had significant events. Again, I'm not going to be critical of anyone, but there's been certain external factors that have meant that the market has been difficult, not just in terms of values, but in terms of quantity of sales. So I don't, and incentives has been a big draw for the buyers that are out there. You know, it's not just specification enhancements. There are, you know, discounts. The argument that the price is the price is not a true one. I don't think there's, you can't go into a shop and offer under the asking price, but with a house that is commonplace. Things like stamp duty is quite often paid and that's not recorded in all the data. And then if I can preempt your question on NDSS.
Well, let me ask my question.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, depends how you're going to
okay.
phrase it.
Okay. I will just come to that. Mr. Drummond, you did talk about incentives, and you said incentives were only amounted to 3 to 5% of values. And I just forgot to ask you where that is in the report, where you said that in the report. Just
It's not in the report. When we did the report, there were very few incentives available.
okay.
But if you were to go to a site now, there would be more incentives available.
Okay.
The only thing that I didn't mention, but before I finished, is that we, through the technical consultation, we were provided kindly by Badger Building with some further house price data, which we assimilated into the report and had regard to, which is set out in table 4.7.
Okay. Okay, which is median prices, new build property. So it's within that data, you say?
Yeah, that's additional data.
Okay.
That they supplied us with.
Okay, so those tables reflect additional data in and of the additional data provided in and of themselves, or are you saying the additional data has been factored into those tables?
It has been factored into, so table 4.7 is the additional data. Table 4.8 are the assumptions that we've used that have factored that in.
Oh, sorry. I'm looking at figures, that's why. So let me just get to tables.
Page 63.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, okay, I've got that. Table 4.7. Okay. Yeah, I noticed the Gorleston price and the Gorleston prices, Clayton Park prices, at 23, 24, yeah.
And the prices that we put the figures on page 66, table 4.10 to the consultation process, and then we amended them through the consultation as per table 4.11 on page 67.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I did see that. But it's helpful just to know that I've been looking at the right things, or we've been looking at the right things. Okay, Mr. Coote, if I could just come to you about your points about the use of NDSS figures. So you said that the use of an NDSS floor space standard, as it were, for the residential floor space calculations in the appraisal is flawed and not realistic in projecting sales values, because you said they are larger than those currently being built, and there are certain ceiling values for 2, 3, 4 bed houses which won't increase with additional floor space. So I just wanted to just looking at your submissions, what evidence have you provided to support that? Perhaps you could just point me to where in the evidence you've said that, you've illustrated that. Thank you.
I don't think there's actual specific evidence, but it's just you know, there is a ceiling price for a 2-bed house, for example. Applying a average of previously sold prices to a larger floor area generates a larger figure, which is just not realistic. the market dictates that in any given area there is a certain value that is just unattainable.
Yeah, okay. Although the values the values I think that are in the appraisal, 3,400 per square meter, is a sort of key value for greenfield sites. I mean, that has been achieved on the Clayton Park site, hasn't it? So, which was, I think, in the evidence that you provided. So, the values that have been assumed are being achieved elsewhere.
On the smaller house types, yes, but you wouldn't apply that same meter squared rate to a larger house type and expect it to be achieved.
Okay, there's nothing specific in those figures though that suggests it's okay. So I can see in the figures in table 4.7 there's a sales value for a bungalow and a sales value for a house. So the 3,400 is the average of those. Yeah.
I mean, you always achieve higher sales values on a bungalow.
Yeah.
It's a demand thing.
Yeah. Okay. But there's no specific evidence, but I respect that you're saying that is your professional experience, that that even if a 2-bed house has more floor space, it's unlikely to achieve a higher value.
It might attract a slightly higher value, but to apply the same rate to the area is not realistic.
Okay. Mr. Drummond, hey, you just respond to that? So seems that's a fairly clear kind of challenge to the figures that you've assumed. So applying that single rate across all house types is not realistic, because certain house types have a ceiling value. So just because you increase the floor space, it might not necessarily achieve a higher sales value.
Yeah, when we're undertaking these studies, we're trying to bring together data from a whole range of sources and do something that is broadly representative of the type of development that's going to come forward. So in terms of the modelling, we started from the SHMA and looked at the housing mix, and we based our housing mix broadly on that, because that is what the council are striving to achieve, to balance the housing market over time. Of course, it's there's more to designing a scheme than just picking a mix out of a SHMA, because one also has to have regard to the nature of the site. If it's in the middle of Great Yarmouth, it'll have more flats. If it's on the edge of Great Yarmouth, it'll be more family housing. So we've used it to inform the scheme. Shall I just pause for Annette? Or?
Oh, yes.
Apologies, sorry for interrupting. I've had a notification that my computer's about to restart, and it won't let me snooze it. So we've got currently about 13 minutes before it does that. I will try and contact IT to see if they can override it, but it might be that I have to pause the recording. I can only apologise. It wouldn't let me override it myself.
Well, that's okay. Shall we just take a break when it comes to that? Do you want to just alert us, and you know, maybe in 10 minutes time, and we can take a break at that point. And then
if I
just
haven't,
use
yes, if I haven't been able to resolve it, I'll jump back on. Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah.
So
Mr.
back to how we do the modelling. We take this high-level information that the schema makes. We think about where the site has come from or where the site is, and we also look at other factors such as the assumptions that the council have used in their site capacities. So they basically, on the greenfield sites, assumed 30 units per hectare, which is at the bottom of the range that we would expect much modern housing to come forward on. Although if it's got a lot of bungalows, it's going to be a slightly lower density in terms of square. So we model in square meters per hectare in the hope, or not the hope, in order that when the actual housing mix comes along and a scheme arrives, we've got about the right amount of development on the site and we have applied about the right value to that scheme.
Yeah, with that, and you're saying that's based on a 30 dwellings per hectare?
Yeah.
Density, okay.
And that's set out at the beginning of chapter 9 of the report of how we've developed the typologies.
Okay. Whoops.
And so you will always have some bigger units, some smaller units, some higher value units that are overlooking, you know, have sea views. You'll have other units at the back of the site that overlook the main road, and the values will vary within the schemes. You'll have corner plots with larger gardens that might have higher values than a mid-terrace plot. We can't begin to capture that nuance within a study of this type, and we're not trying to. The PPG is very clear we should use average costs and values, and you can't just take a single source of data and extract the average from that, but you can bring it together to get a sort of average value that is typical in that part of the world. And that is what we've done.
Yeah. Okay,
So
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were going to say something more. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I always say too much, and I got to the point of not saying.
Okay. No, that's fine. Mr. Coote, you want to come back in there, and then I'm going to move on to affordable housing values.
Just very quickly, I mean, it's all well and good using average values, but there has to be some local market knowledge applied as well.
Okay.
And just on the density issue, is that factoring in BNG? Because if you're delivering BNG on site, then your densities are going to be lower than when the report assumptions were made.
Yeah. Mr. John Hay, do you want to just answer that specific point? I mean, we wasn't intending to cover policy costs, but yeah.
So that is the net. So the 30 units per hectare is the net developable area, and then we've made allowance for open space in addition to that, and that's set out in table 9.1.
Yeah.
And 9.2.
Yeah. You meant, Mr. Coote, you meant the area of land set aside for BNG rather than the cost of it. Mr. Coote.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the advice that we're receiving at the moment is approximately if it's an arable field, then approximately a third of the site, including open space, should be set aside to deal with BNG if you're delivering it on site.
Yeah. Okay.
Which of course is the preference in the hierarchy.
Yeah. But I think the plot coverage or the site coverage, just remind me what sort of average you've assumed for plot coverage in your study.
Yep. So for large sites over 4 hectares, 70%.
Okay.
And 0.4 hectares to 4 hectares, 80%.
Okay.
Well, 4 hectares about an acre, and the smaller ones we've used 100%.
Okay. So so there is some scope in there, isn't there? If there's only a 70% plot coverage for the remainder of the site to be used for BNG and open space.
Yeah, absolutely. The BNG we would expect to be delivered on site, and the 10% requirement it is generally provided on site. Very rarely is it not provided on site.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Coote, sorry, see you wanted to come back in there.
The 70%, where's the allowance for roads for the ever increasing requirement for wider roads, wider footpaths?
Yeah.
Tree lined
I'm presuming
streets,
that's part of the 70%, isn't it?
You know, that's just not a realistic assumption.
Okay. I'm not going to go there in terms of plot coverage because that's not an area that you've particularly challenged in your evidence. So it was just dealing with the BNG point that you raised. Okay, I'm going to move on to affordable housing values. Before we do that, Annette, have you been able to resolve your issues with shutdown?
No, unfortunately, I've sent some urgent emails and copied a few people in, but no one's come back to me yet. And it doesn't seem that I'm going to be able to stop it. We're now on 6 minutes.
Okay. And how long is it saying reboot or restart will take?
It doesn't, unfortunately, give me that information.
But it's usually a short period of time, isn't it?
It always takes twice as long.
Okay. Well, it's 10:30. We've been going for an hour, but I think it's probably a good time just to take a break. So no harm in us taking 2 sort of shorter breaks this morning. So should we just break for 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Do you want to do that?
I think that would be sufficient because I can force the restart. So the minute we stop the teams, I'll force the restart. Right. And obviously, if you all rejoin using the same invite,
okay.
So there's no need for me to reissue anything.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll just take a break there. So we need to leave, don't we?
Yes, I think you do.
Yeah, because the recording will stop. So we'll leave and then rejoin. So if we say it's 10:27 on my laptop. So if you can coordinate with your watches and just log back on at 10:45, that would be good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies. Thank you.